Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other kids in her small Texas town. While other girls played with dolls, she climbed trees and built forts. Her father, a former Marine, taught her to shoot before she could properly ride a bike. When bullies picked on smaller kids at school, Sarah stepped in, earning herself black eyes and detention slips that her mother kept hidden from her father. The mockery started early. In high school, when Sarah announced she wanted to join the military, her classmates laughed. "Girls don't belong in combat," sneered Jake Morrison, the quarterback who thought his Letterman jacket made him invincible. "You should stick to cheerleading or nursing, Martinez." Even some teachers shook their heads when she spoke about her dreams during career day presentations. Sarah's own family wasn't much better. Her grandmother constantly reminded her that nice girls got married and had babies, not ran around playing soldier. Her mother worried constantly, begging Sarah to consider safer career paths like teaching or office work. Only her father understood, but even he had doubts when Sarah declared she didn't just want to join the military, she wanted to become a Navy SEAL. "Honey, SEALs are elite warriors," her father said gently one evening as they cleaned their hunting rifles. "The training breaks grown men. Maybe you should consider the regular Navy first. See how that goes." His words stung because they came from love, but Sarah heard the same doubt she'd been fighting her entire life. The guidance counselor at school was even more direct. Mrs. Henderson pulled Sarah aside after a college prep meeting and spoke in the condescending tone adults used when they thought they knew better. "Sarah, dear, you're a bright girl with good grades. Why throw your life away chasing impossible dreams? Women can't be SEALs. It's not allowed, and even if it were, you're not built for it. You're barely 5'4". Every rejection letter from military recruiters felt like a knife twist. "Thank you for your interest, but..." They all began the same way. Sarah's grades were excellent, her physical fitness scores impressive, but the doors remained closed. The few recruiters who would meet with her spoke about administrative roles, intelligence work, anything except combat operations. Her breaking point came during senior year when Jake Morrison cornered her after a school assembly about military careers. "Still playing soldier, Martinez?" he taunted, his friends gathering around like jackals. "My dad says women in the military are just there to cook and clean for the real soldiers. Maybe you'll get lucky and some sailor will marry you before you wash out." Sarah's hands clenched into fists, but she forced herself to walk away. That night she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if everyone was right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe her dreams were too big for someone like her. The weight of constant rejection and mockery pressed down on her chest like a boulder. But then she remembered something her father had told her years ago after she'd lost a particularly brutal fight, defending a younger student from bullies. "Strength isn't about never getting knocked down, Mija. It's about getting back up every single time." He'd bandaged her split lip and added, "The strongest steel goes through the hottest fire." The next morning, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. If traditional paths were closed to her, she'd create her own. She researched every possible route into special operations, memorized physical fitness requirements, and began training with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Before dawn each day, she ran 5 miles through the Texas heat. After school, she lifted weights in her garage gym that her father had helped her build. When her classmates were at parties or hanging out at the mall, Sarah was doing push-ups until her arms shook, swimming laps at the community pool until the lifeguards went home, and practicing martial arts moves she learned from library books and grainy internet videos. Her mother worried about her social life, but Sarah had found her purpose in the pain of training. The physical preparation was only part of it. Sarah studied military history, tactics, and survival techniques. She learned to navigate by stars, to identify edible plants, and to remain calm under pressure. When other kids complained about pop quizzes, Sarah smiled. She'd been testing herself daily for months. Her transformation didn't go unnoticed. By graduation, Sarah's lean frame had become pure muscle, her reflexes lightning quick from constant training. But the mockery continued. At the senior awards ceremony, when Sarah received a fitness scholarship to college, Jake Morrison made crude comments about her muscular build. "Looks like Martinez has been hitting the steroids," he whispered loudly enough for half the auditorium to hear. Sarah walked across that stage with her head high, diploma in hand, knowing that her real journey was just beginning. The doubters, the mockers, the people who said she wasn't good enough, they had no idea what was coming. She'd spent years preparing for war, and the battle was finally about to begin. As she packed for college that summer, Sarah found an old notebook filled with her childhood dreams and goals. On the first page, written in her 10-year-old handwriting, were the words, "I want to protect people." Below it, in fresh ink, she added, "No matter what it takes." College was supposed to be a fresh start, but Sarah quickly learned that geography couldn't outrun prejudice. At the University of California, San Diego, she majored in criminology while secretly preparing for what seemed impossible, a chance to prove herself worthy of elite military service. The policy preventing women from serving in combat roles was still firmly in place, but Sarah had heard whispers of changes coming, political pressure mounting to open more doors. Her ROTC instructors initially treated her like a novelty. Captain Reynolds, a grizzled veteran with 3 tours in Afghanistan, assigned her to communications training while the male cadets learned assault tactics. "Martinez, you've got good grades and decent fitness scores," he told her during their first one-on-one meeting. "Focus on intelligence work or logistics. That's where women excel in the military." Sarah bit back her frustration and asked for additional training opportunities. She volunteered for every field exercise, every extra duty, every chance to prove herself. When other cadets complained about early morning PT, Sarah was already dressed and waiting. During survival training weekends, while others grumbled about cold rations and sleeping on the ground, Sarah thrived. The real breakthrough came during a joint training exercise with Navy personnel. Chief Petty Officer Williams, a former SEAL instructor, watched Sarah navigate an obstacle course that had defeated half the male cadets. She moved with precision and grace, her small frame allowing her to slip through gaps others couldn't manage, while her relentless training gave her the endurance to finish strong when bigger candidates faltered. After the exercise, Williams approached her privately. "I've been watching you, Martinez. You've got something special, that fire in your belly that can't be taught." He looked around to ensure they weren't being overheard. "Changes are coming to the military. The ban on women in combat is being challenged in courts and Congress. If opportunities open up, you need to be ready." Williams became Sarah's unofficial mentor, designing brutal training regimens that pushed her beyond normal ROTC requirements. He taught her advanced tactics during weekend sessions that she told everyone were study groups. Under his guidance, Sarah learned close-quarters combat, advanced marksmanship, and underwater operations in the university pool after hours. The training was punishing. Williams pushed her harder than he'd pushed male candidates because he knew she'd face twice the scrutiny if she ever got her chance. Sarah's hands bled from rope climbs, her lungs burned from underwater breath-holding exercises, and her muscles ached constantly from carrying heavy packs over long distances. But with each brutal session, she grew stronger and more determined. Her college social life suffered. While roommates went to parties and dated, Sarah spent her free time training or studying military tactics. Her dorm room looked like a mini command center, with maps, tactical manuals, and fitness charts covering every wall. Other students thought she was obsessed, possibly unstable. The mockery followed her even here. During a ROTC formal dinner, Cadet Thompson, whose father was a general, cornered her at the bar. "Martinez, I heard you think you're going to be some kind of super soldier," he said, alcohol making him bolder than usual. "My dad says they might let women play at being warriors, but when real fighting starts, you'll be crying for someone to save you." Sarah's response was measured, controlled, the product of years of biting her tongue. "We'll see," was all she said. But her eyes held a promise that made Thompson step back unconsciously. She'd learned that the strongest responses often came in silence, letting actions speak louder than words. The breakthrough she'd been waiting for came during her junior year. The military announced pilot programs that would allow women to attempt certain special operations training, including Navy SEAL preparation courses. The news sent shockwaves through military communities, with opinions split sharply between progressives celebrating the change and traditionalists predicting disaster. Sarah's hands shook as she read the announcement online. After years of preparation, after countless hours of training and study, after enduring endless mockery and doubt, the door was finally cracking open. The requirements were staggering. Candidates needed to pass the same physical and mental tests as male SEALs. With no modifications or special considerations, Captain Reynolds called her into his office the day after the announcement. His expression was unreadable as he gestured for her to sit. "I suppose you'll be applying for this new program," he said, tapping the official notice on his desk. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Reynolds studied her for a long moment before continuing. "Martinez, I've watched you for 3 years. You work harder than anyone I've trained, male or female, but wanting something and achieving it are different things entirely." He leaned forward in his chair. "SEAL training breaks approximately 80% of male candidates, men who've been preparing their entire lives for this moment. The instructors will push you beyond what you think is humanly possible, and they'll be looking for any excuse to wash you out. Are you absolutely certain you want to attempt this?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I've been preparing for this my entire life. I know the odds, I know the challenges, and I know there will be people hoping to see me fail. But I also know that someone has to be first. Someone has to prove it can be done. If I don't try, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Reynolds nodded slowly, then opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "I've been tracking your progress since your freshman year. Your fitness scores, tactical knowledge, leadership evaluations, they're all here. If you're serious about this, I'll recommend you for the program. But understand that from the moment you walk into SEAL training, you'll have a target on your back. Every instructor, every fellow candidate, and every person who believes women don't belong there will be watching for you to fail." That night, Sarah called her father to tell him about her decision. The phone was quiet for a long moment after she finished explaining. Finally, her father's voice came through, thick with emotion. "Mia, I always knew this day would come. I've watched you fight for your dreams since you were old enough to walk. If anyone can do this impossible thing, it's you. Your mother and I will be proud of you no matter what happens." As Sarah hung up the phone and began filling out the application that would change her life forever, she thought about all the people who had told her this moment would never come. Tomorrow she would prove them wrong or die trying. Either way, she was finally going to war. The bus pulled into Naval Amphibious Base Coronado on a gray Monday morning that felt like Judgment Day. Sarah pressed her face against the window, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Somewhere beyond those waters lay the mission she'd dreamed about, the chance to serve alongside the world's most elite warriors. But first she had to survive the next 6 months of training that would either forge her into a Navy SEAL or destroy her completely. She wasn't the only woman on the bus. 3 others had qualified for the pilot program, each carrying their own dreams and their own burden of proof. Jessica Chen, a former Olympic swimmer from California; Maria Rodriguez, an Army veteran who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic; and Rachel Thompson, whose father was a Medal of Honor recipient and whose brothers were both active SEALs. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that she was probably the least qualified on paper. No Olympic medals, no combat experience, no military family legacy beyond her father's Marine service. But as the bus stopped and they gathered their gear, she felt the familiar calm that settled over her before any challenge. She'd been preparing for this moment since she was 10 years old. Chief Instructor Kowalski was exactly what Central Casting would order for a SEAL trainer. 6'3" of muscle and scars with eyes that could see through lies and excuses. He stood at the front of the classroom as 43 candidates filed in, 39 men and 4 women who would soon discover that equality meant equal opportunity to suffer. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kowalski's voice carried the authority of someone who'd earned his stripes in the worst places on Earth. "Welcome to Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. For the next 24 weeks, we will attempt to transform you from ordinary humans into something extraordinary. Most of you will fail. This is not a prediction, it's a mathematical certainty." His eyes swept across the room, lingering on each female candidate. "Some of you are here because politicians decided to conduct a social experiment. Others are here because you genuinely believe you belong among the world's finest warriors. Over the next few months, we'll discover which category you fall into. The ocean doesn't care about your gender, your background, or your feelings. Neither do I." The first week was designed to weed out the dreamers from the serious candidates. Sarah's alarm clock buzzed at 400 hours, but she was already awake. Had been for 20 minutes, using the time to center herself for another day of controlled torture. Physical training began before sunrise with a 5-mile run in soft sand that turned legs to jelly and lungs to fire. During the second day's run, she found herself keeping pace with Marcus Webb, a former college football player who outweighed her by 80 pounds. His breathing was labored while hers remained steady, a testament to years of relentless cardio training. Behind them, 2 male candidates had already dropped out, unable to maintain the pace that Sarah held without apparent strain. The swimming tests revealed her true advantage. While larger candidates struggled with the precise technique required for combat swimming, Sarah's smaller frame cut through water with dolphin-like efficiency. During the 500-meter freestyle evaluation, she finished third overall, ahead of 36 men who'd assumed her gender would be a liability in every aspect of training. But the instructors weren't interested in celebrating anyone's successes. They were searching for weaknesses, pressure points that would reveal character flaws under stress. For Sarah, that pressure point became painfully clear during the first week of team exercises. Instructor Hayes, a compact man with dead eyes and a reputation for ending careers, assigned Sarah to lead a patrol exercise. As she briefed her team of 8 male candidates, she could see the resentment in their faces. These were alpha males who'd dominated every physical challenge they'd ever faced, now taking orders from someone they could lift with one hand. "Martinez thinks she's in charge," whispered Rodriguez, a former gang member from Los Angeles who'd joined the Navy to escape his past. "Maybe we should show her how real teams operate." The sabotage was subtle but effective. During the navigation exercise, her compass mysteriously malfunctioned. Radio communications were mysteriously garbled when she tried to call for support. Equipment she'd personally checked appeared damaged when she needed it most. Her team accidentally provided incorrect intelligence that led her patrol into an obvious trap. Hayes watched everything with the detached interest of a scientist studying lab rats. When Sarah's team failed the mission objectives, he called her aside for a private conversation that would haunt her dreams. "Martinez, leadership isn't about being the smartest or the strongest," he said, his voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. "It's about earning the absolute trust of people who will follow you into hell. Right now, your own teammates are sabotaging you. Fix it, or find a new career." That night, Sarah lay in her narrow bunk listening to the whispered conversations of candidates who thought she was asleep. The women were facing similar challenges, but differently. Jessica was being sexually harassed by instructors testing her composure. Maria was dealing with teammates who assumed her medical background made her weak. Rachel faced the additional pressure of living up to her family's legendary reputation. Sarah's breaking point came during the third week, during a beach training exercise that simulated prisoner rescue operations. Her team was tasked with infiltrating a mock enemy compound and extracting a high-value target without detection. Sarah spent hours planning the mission, accounting for every variable, briefing each team member on their specific role. The mission began perfectly. They approached the target building undetected, neutralized simulated guards with textbook precision, and located their objective exactly where intelligence indicated. But as they began their extraction, everything went wrong at once. Rodriguez accidentally triggered an alarm. Thompson forgot to secure their exit route. Williams misunderstood his assignment and abandoned his position. Within minutes, Sarah's carefully planned operation became a disaster. Enemy forces surrounded them. Her team scattered like leaves in a storm, and the mission objective was lost. As she lay in the sand with simulated gunfire echoing around her, Sarah realized the truth that no amount of preparation could have revealed. She wasn't just fighting to become a SEAL, she was fighting her own teammates for the right to try. Instructor Hayes appeared beside her as the exercise concluded. "Martinez, in real operations, teammates die when missions fail. Your team just got everyone killed, including the hostage you were supposed to save. What's your assessment of the situation?" Sarah looked at her teammates, all of whom were avoiding eye contact. She thought about making excuses, explaining the sabotage, pleading for understanding. Instead, she met Hayes' stare directly. "Sir, the mission failed because I failed to earn my team's trust and cooperation. Whatever problems exist, leadership is ultimately responsible for solving them. The failure is mine." Hayes nodded slowly. "Interesting perspective, Martinez. Most people would blame their teammates for the problems you're facing, but you're taking responsibility for circumstances beyond your control. That's either admirable leadership or foolish martyrdom. We'll see which one over the next few weeks." As Sarah walked back to the barracks that night covered in sand and salt water, she felt something crystallize in her chest. The mockery and sabotage were tests, just like everything else in this place. The real question wasn't whether she was strong enough to be a SEAL. The question was whether she was strong enough to transform enemies into brothers, to earn respect from people determined to see her fail, to lead when no one wanted to follow. Hell Week arrived like a hurricane that everyone could see coming, but no one could prepare for. 5.5 days of continuous training with a maximum of 4 hours of sleep total. Sarah had read about it, studied survivor accounts, and trained her body and mind for months. Nothing could have truly prepared her for the reality of systematic physical and psychological breakdown. The week began with surf torture at 0200 hours. Candidates linked arms and sat in the freezing Pacific surf, while instructors screamed orders and cold water crashed over their heads every few seconds. Hypothermia set in within 20 minutes. Sarah's teeth chattered uncontrollably, her muscles cramped from the cold, and her mind began the mental gymnastics required to survive when every instinct screamed to quit. Beside her, Rodriguez began to crack. The gang member who'd spent weeks undermining her leadership was now shaking like a leaf, his tough guy facade crumbling under the relentless assault of cold water and sleep deprivation. "I can't do this," he whispered through blue lips. "Martinez, help me. I can't feel my legs," and Sarah could have let him fail. After weeks of sabotage and disrespect, justice would have been watching him ring the bell and walk away in defeat. Instead, she grabbed his arm and pulled him closer, sharing body heat and whispering encouragement. "Stay with me, Rodriguez. We're going to get through this together. Focus on my voice and match my breathing." Instructor Hayes noticed the interaction but said nothing, filing the information away for future reference. Leadership under extreme stress revealed character in ways that normal circumstances never could. Sarah was choosing to save a teammate who'd been trying to destroy her, demonstrating the kind of moral courage that couldn't be taught or faked. By day 2, 3 male candidates had quit. The remaining candidates moved through training exercises like zombies, their faces blank with exhaustion, their movements mechanical and clumsy. Sarah's advantage became apparent as smaller body size meant less energy required for movement, and her years of mental preparation helped her compartmentalize pain and fatigue better than larger candidates. The log PT was designed to break teams apart. 8-person crews carried massive telephone poles over sand dunes, through surf and around obstacle courses for hours at a time. Sarah's crew was intentionally loaded with the biggest men in the class, creating a ridiculous visual of a tiny woman struggling under a portion of weight that physics suggested she couldn't handle. The sabotage continued, but subtly. Teammates would shift the log's weight to her section when instructors weren't watching, trying to crush her under the impossible load. They whispered cruel comments about her size and strength, hoping to break her mentally when physical exhaustion made emotional defenses weak. But something unexpected happened during the 3rd day. Williams, the former Marine who'd been one of her harshest critics, collapsed during a log carry. Heat exhaustion combined with sleep deprivation dropped him to the sand like a felled tree. While other teammates hesitated, unsure whether helping would mark them as weak, Sarah immediately dropped to his side. She checked his pulse, elevated his legs, and called for medical assistance while shielding his body from the sun with her own. The rest of the crew wanted to abandon him and continue the exercise, but Sarah refused to move until medics arrived. "No one gets left behind," she told them firmly. "That's what this is about, isn't it?" Williams recovered, but the incident shifted something fundamental in team dynamics. The man who'd spent weeks questioning her strength had been saved by her quick thinking and courage. Word spread through the remaining candidates that Martinez wasn't just tough, she was reliable under pressure. The kind of teammate you wanted beside you when everything went wrong. The boat crews provided another test of leadership and teamwork. 7-person teams raced heavy rubber boats through surf that seemed designed to kill them. Sarah found herself naturally taking charge during these exercises, not through force or volume, but through calm competence and tactical thinking. Her crew began looking to her for decisions, responding to her commands with the automatic obedience that came from trust earned under fire. Jessica Chen washed out on day 4. The Olympic swimmer who dominated every water exercise finally broke during a surf passage that went wrong. A wave caught their boat wrong, flipping it and trapping Jessica underneath. When she surfaced, gasping and panicking, she swam directly to the beach and rang the bell. Sarah watched her friend walk away and felt a piece of her own heartbreak. The remaining female candidates drew closer together, not from weakness but from understanding. They were carrying the hopes and expectations of every woman who'd ever been told she wasn't strong enough, wasn't tough enough, didn't belong in places where life and death decisions were made. The pressure was crushing, but it also forged them into something stronger than they'd been individually. By day 5, hallucinations began. Sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion created a surreal landscape where reality blurred with nightmare. Sarah found herself having conversations with people who weren't there, seeing movement in shadows that held nothing but sand and darkness. The key was recognizing the hallucinations without fighting them, accepting the altered state while maintaining enough awareness to follow orders and complete tasks. The final test came during a simulated mission that required teams to infiltrate an enemy position, gather intelligence, and extract without detection. Sarah's team had been reduced to 6 members, with Rodriguez and Williams now following her lead without question. The mission required precision timing, careful coordination, and absolute trust between teammates. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Their insertion point was compromised, forcing an emergency route change. Enemy patrols appeared where intelligence said they shouldn't be. Equipment failed at critical moments, but Sarah's team adapted, communicating through hand signals and shared understanding that came from suffering together. When Rodriguez froze during the final approach, overwhelmed by exhaustion and fear, Sarah didn't abandon him. She grabbed his gear and whispered quick reassurance, then led him through the obstacle step by step. When Williams injured his ankle during extraction, she helped carry his weight without being asked. Her teammates began moving with the fluid coordination of a single organism, each member supporting the others without hesitation. They completed the mission successfully, one of only 3 teams to do so. As they collapsed on the beach afterward, Williams grabbed Sarah's shoulder with a grip that spoke louder than words. "Martinez," he said, his voice hoarse from 5 days of controlled screaming, "I was wrong about you. You're not trying to prove you're as good as us. You're trying to prove we can all be better together." Hell Week ended with a ceremony that felt like resurrection. 28 candidates remained from the original 43. Sarah stood among them, no longer the outsider trying to prove herself worthy, but a tested warrior who'd earned her place through shared suffering and demonstrated courage. The instructors who'd spent months trying to break her now nodded with something approaching respect. But even as she celebrated surviving the most brutal test of her life, Sarah knew the real challenges lay ahead. Hell Week had broken down the barriers between her and her teammates, but the outside world was watching, waiting for her to fail. Every future mission would carry the weight of proving that women belonged among America's most elite warriors. The hardest battles were still to come. The months following Hell Week brought a different kind of challenge. The surviving candidates entered advanced training phases that would determine not just who could endure punishment, but who could master the deadly skills required of Navy SEALs. Sarah found herself in a strange position, no longer fighting for basic acceptance, but now expected to excel at levels that would justify the controversy surrounding women in special operations. The media attention was relentless. News crews camped outside the base, hoping to catch glimpses of the women who'd survived Hell Week. Talk show hosts debated whether their success proved equality or represented lowered standards. Politicians used their names as talking points in speeches about military readiness and social progress. Sarah tried to ignore the noise, but it was impossible to escape the weight of being a symbol rather than just a soldier. Advanced combat training revealed new dimensions of the challenge. Close-quarters battle training required split-second decision-making in scenarios designed to simulate real combat conditions. Sarah's smaller size became an advantage in confined spaces, allowing her to move through doorways and around obstacles with fluid grace while larger teammates struggled with angles and positioning. During one memorable exercise, her team was tasked with clearing a building held by simulated terrorists. The scenario involved multiple floors, civilian hostages, and time pressure that turned every decision into a potential catastrophe. Sarah found herself naturally falling into the point position, leading the team through the structure with tactical awareness that impressed even skeptical instructors. The breakthrough moment came when they encountered a scenario designed specifically to exploit perceived female weaknesses. Instructor Martinez, no relation despite the shared name, had created a situation where the team had to extract a wounded teammate through a narrow window while under enemy fire. The wounded man weighed 200 pounds, and the window was barely large enough for one person to pass through. While her teammates debated how to move the simulated casualty, Sarah studied the problem from different angles. The obvious approach was brute force: lift the man and push him through. But physics worked against that solution, and time was running out as simulated enemy fire intensified around their position. Sarah's solution was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of fighting the geometry, she used it. She rigged a pulley system using rope and equipment harnesses, then positioned herself on the outside of the building to guide the casualty through the opening while her teammates provided the lifting power from inside. It took 3 minutes versus the 15 minutes other teams spent trying to force the obvious solution. Instructor Martinez watched the entire exercise with professional interest. Afterward, he pulled Sarah aside for a conversation that would become legend among future SEAL classes. "Martinez, most people look at obstacles and see what they can't do," he said. "You look at obstacles and see what they can become. That's the difference between following orders and leading missions." The underwater training phase was where Sarah's years of preparation truly paid dividends. Combat swimming in full gear, underwater navigation, and maritime infiltration techniques came naturally to her. While classmates struggled with the claustrophobic sensation of breathing apparatus underwater, Sarah moved through the depths like she'd been born there. The pinnacle test was a night dive to plant simulated explosives on a target ship. Teams had to swim 2 miles underwater, navigate to precise coordinates using only compass and timing, attach their charges without detection, and return to extraction points before dawn. The margin for error was 0. In real operations, failure meant death by drowning, enemy fire, or explosive detonation. Sarah's team approached the target ship like ghosts. Her navigation was flawless, bringing them to the exact attachment point with surgical precision. While Williams and Rodriguez provided security, she attached the charges with steady hands that showed no trace of the nervousness that made other candidates fumble with equipment in the crushing darkness below the surface. The return swim tested endurance and mental strength in equal measure. 2 miles underwater with diminishing air supplies and growing fatigue that made every stroke feel like moving through concrete. Sarah's breathing remained controlled, her pace steady, her mind clear despite the physical demands that were breaking down larger, stronger swimmers around her. They surfaced at the extraction point with minutes to spare, the first team to complete the mission successfully. As they floated in the dark Pacific swells waiting for pickup, Williams grabbed Sarah's arm. "I've been thinking about what you said during Hell Week about no one getting left behind," he said. "Tonight you didn't just lead us to the target. You brought all of us home. That's what matters." The final phase of training focused on real-world mission scenarios that tested everything they'd learned. Sarah found herself selected for increasingly complex leadership roles, not because of political correctness or social engineering, but because her tactical thinking and team management skills had earned genuine respect from instructors and classmates alike. The culminating exercise was a multi-day mission that simulated a high-value target extraction in hostile territory. Sarah's team was tasked with infiltrating enemy territory, locating and securing a captured pilot, and extracting him before enemy reinforcements could prevent rescue. Everything they'd learned about combat, navigation, communication, and teamwork would be tested under conditions designed to replicate the chaos and stress of actual warfare. The mission began with a pre-dawn helicopter insertion into rough terrain 50 miles from the target location. Sarah's team moved through mountains and valleys for 2 days, avoiding enemy patrols and gathering intelligence about their objective's location. Her leadership style had evolved from the aggressive confidence of early training to a quieter competence that earned automatic obedience from teammates who'd learned to trust her judgment completely. The rescue itself required precise timing and flawless execution. The simulated pilot was being held in a compound guarded by instructors playing enemy forces who knew every trick the students might attempt. Sarah's approach was patient and methodical, observing the target for hours to identify patrol patterns and security weaknesses before committing her team to action. When they finally moved, everything happened with clockwork precision. Rodriguez neutralized guards with non-lethal techniques while Williams secured the perimeter. Sarah and Thompson penetrated the building, located the pilot, and began extraction procedures. The entire operation took less than 12 minutes from initiation to successful withdrawal. But the real test came during extraction, when everything went wrong at once. Enemy reinforcements arrived ahead of schedule. Their extraction helicopter was delayed by mechanical problems, and Thompson injured his leg during withdrawal from the compound. Sarah found herself managing a tactical nightmare with limited resources and time running out. Her solution required splitting the team and taking calculated risks that could have resulted in mission failure. She sent Rodriguez and Williams ahead with the rescued pilot, while she and Thompson held a defensive position to buy time for helicopter arrival. For 20 minutes, they held off superior numbers using tactical advantages and superior positioning until extraction finally arrived. As the helicopter lifted off and Sarah watched the training ground disappear below them, she realized something fundamental had changed. She was no longer fighting to prove she belonged among Navy SEALs. She had become one, earning her place through demonstrated competence under pressure that couldn't be faked or awarded through political correctness. The graduation ceremony was attended by high-ranking officials, media representatives, and family members who'd traveled across the country to witness history being made. Sarah stood among the 17 candidates who'd completed the full training program, no longer a symbol or experiment, but a proven warrior ready for whatever challenges awaited in the real world. 3 years after graduation, Chief Petty Officer Sarah Martinez stood on the deck of a naval vessel in the Arabian Sea, preparing for a mission that would define not just her career, but the future of women in special operations. Intelligence had located a high-value terrorist leader in a compound that traditional forces couldn't reach without massive civilian casualties. The mission required surgical precision, perfect timing, and the kind of warrior who'd been forged in the crucible of the world's most demanding training. Her team was a mix of veterans and newer SEALs, including Rodriguez and Williams, who'd requested to serve under her command. The irony wasn't lost on any of them that the men who'd once sabotaged her training now trusted her with their lives. Time and shared danger had transformed former enemies into brothers in arms, who knew her capabilities better than anyone else in the world. The target was Khalid Hassan, a bomb maker whose devices had killed hundreds of civilians across 3 continents. He'd taken refuge in a fortified compound surrounded by human shields and protected by fighters who'd sworn to die rather than surrender their leader. Previous attempts to capture or kill Hassan had failed, resulting in civilian casualties that made international headlines and political embarrassment for Allied forces. Sarah's mission briefing revealed the complexity of the challenge. The compound was built into a cliffside overlooking the sea, accessible only through a narrow valley that enemy forces could easily defend. Traditional assault approaches would result in prolonged firefights that endangered nearby civilians and gave Hassan time to escape through tunnels that intelligence suspected but couldn't confirm. The plan Sarah developed was audacious in its simplicity and surgical in its precision. Instead of fighting through the valley approach, her team would infiltrate from the sea using underwater approach techniques she'd mastered during training. They would scale the cliff face in darkness, neutralize perimeter guards without raising alarms, and extract Hassan before enemy forces could organize effective resistance. The night of the mission, Sarah led her team through swells that threatened to dash them against the rocks below the target compound. Years of training in California's brutal surf had prepared her for water that seemed determined to kill them before they could reach their objective. Her underwater navigation was flawless, bringing them to the exact landing point despite currents and darkness that would have confused less experienced operators. The cliff climb tested every skill they'd developed during mountain warfare training. Sarah led the ascent, finding handholds and rock faces that seemed impossible to scale, securing ropes that allowed her heavier teammates to follow her path. 200 feet above the churning sea, with enemy sentries patrolling just yards away, she moved with spider-like grace that made the impossible look routine. Her team reached the compound perimeter without detection, a feat that required perfect coordination and absolute silence. Sarah's hand signals guided them through patrol patterns they'd memorized from days of surveillance. When they encountered an unexpected guard position, she adapted instantly, redirecting the team through an alternate route that avoided confrontation while maintaining their timeline. The extraction of Hassan himself required skills that went beyond physical training. Sarah's team had to breach his sleeping quarters, subdue him without allowing any sound that might alert nearby guards, and prepare him for transport while maintaining the element of surprise that had gotten them this far. The entire sequence took less than 3 minutes, but the mission's most challenging moment came during extraction when everything that could go wrong did go wrong at once. Hassan's bodyguard discovered the breach and raised an alarm, Enemy forces converged on the compound from multiple directions. Their planned extraction route was compromised by enemy fire that made movement suicidal. Sarah found herself commanding a desperate fighting withdrawal against overwhelming odds. Her team was outnumbered 10-1, trapped on a clifftop with no cover except the darkness that was rapidly giving way to dawn. The helicopter extraction that should have been routine became a race against time and superior firepower. Rodriguez took a bullet in the shoulder during the initial engagement, but continued fighting despite the wound that would have incapacitated a lesser warrior. Williams held an impossible position against enemy assault, buying time for Sarah to organize defensive positions and call for air support. Thompson provided covering fire that allowed wounded teammates to reach safety. Sarah's tactical decisions during those desperate minutes demonstrated why her instructors had recognized her potential years earlier. She didn't panic under pressure that was literally life and death. Instead, she evaluated options with clear thinking, made decisions based on tactical reality rather than wishful thinking, and led by example rather than just giving orders. When their ammunition began running low and enemy forces closed in from three sides, Sarah made a decision that violated every tactical manual, but saved her team's lives. Instead of fighting a conventional withdrawal that would result in casualties, she used Hassan as leverage to negotiate a temporary ceasefire that allowed helicopter extraction under fire. The helicopter ride back to base was quiet except for the sound of rotors and Rodriguez receiving medical attention for his wound. Sarah looked at the faces of her teammates and saw something that no amount of training could have provided: absolute trust earned under the worst possible circumstances. These men would follow her into hell because they'd seen her bring them back from it. The after-action reports were classified, but word of the mission's success spread through military communities with the speed of legend. Sarah's tactical leadership under extreme pressure had accomplished what previous missions had failed to achieve, capturing a high-value target without civilian casualties and bringing her entire team home alive despite overwhelming odds. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a promotion board that included some of the same officers who'd questioned whether women belonged in special operations. The skepticism was gone, replaced by professional respect for demonstrated competence that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. Her personnel file contained commendations from fellow SEALs, successful mission reports that spoke for themselves, and recommendations from commanding officers who'd seen her abilities firsthand. The promotion to Senior Chief Petty Officer came with a new assignment: training the next generation of special operations candidates, including women who'd followed the path she'd blazed through determination and courage. Sarah's first class included daughters of the men who'd once mocked her dreams, young women who now had role models proving that barriers existed only until someone was strong enough to break them. On graduation day, Sarah watched new SEALs receive their tridents and remembered her own journey from mocked teenager to respected warrior. The path had been longer and harder than anyone should have to travel, but it had led to something worth the struggle. Proof that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle, that strength came in many forms, and that the only real limitations were the ones people imposed on themselves. As she handed tridents to graduating candidates, including 3 women who'd survived training that broke men twice their size, Sarah thought about the girl from Texas who'd once been told her dreams were impossible. That girl would be proud of the woman she'd become, not because of the rank or recognition, but because of the lives she'd saved and the barriers she'd broken for others to follow. The mockery had ended years ago, replaced by respect earned through actions rather than words. The ropes that had tried to bind her to other people's expectations had been cut by her own determination, and the girl they'd tried to break had become the warrior who showed them what a Navy SEAL could really do.